Pat, man, thank you so much for coming on the show here today. This is only our third try trying to get this recorded, so we're going to make it happen. For starters, man, fill me in. What's new in your life? What's going on?
I don't know that there's a ton new. It's just it's always improving and fun and a lot of moving parts. Before we recorded, I mentioned that there's some changes and things that we're doing a little bit differently with the business coaching side of things. There's some new business projects, one of which the process you and I can talk about a little bit more later. Travel with family, some live events, mastermind speaking, and some youth baseball. So
Love it.
not a lot different, but it's all good. It's just full, right? It's a
Yes.
full, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So, one thing that I always think about is that every great superhero has an origin story. And for people that are unfamiliar with you and what you do now, I would love to hear your origin story and what prompted you to create your own ideal business.
The ideal business, man. So for people who don't know me, I was a college baseball coach, college strength coach, decided I wanted to own my own business for a host of reasons. First business, training business went well. Second business was like a membership base and a training business kind of blended, and that went well. Started doing a little bit of consulting, happened to probably sync it up about the time that a lot of the online stuff was taking off. So it was it allowed for more reach.
Yep.
And, and that just, there's a lot of momentum there. Got to do a lot of business coaching stuff. It opened doors to doing everything from running masterminds to owning certification organizations to founding a couple franchises.
Yep.
And along the way, there were just a lot of moving parts. At one point, I was like the CEO of like 8 businesses simultaneously. I would never recommend to anybody. That's a terrible plan. And it just, it was one of those situations where I had kind of created a business, or at least my role in the business, that I just didn't enjoy.
Yeah.
I was wearing hats that I didn't really want to wear, and I wasn't doing enough of the stuff like coaching that I was really excited about doing. There were just a lot of things that were not, for lack of a more eloquent way to put it, fun. And said, okay, well, if I can build this big thing, maybe I can build something better. So I started
Right.
to think about what success would actually be to me, knowing what I knew now. If I were just going to start from scratch, like, what would my role be? Who would I work with? What would the business look like? What kind of problems would I solve? And, heck, it's been 8 years ago now. I'd sold my stake and all that other stuff, created a new business, really focused on working with the people that I wanted to work with and helping them build the things they wanted to build. And I put some guardrails in place for myself, the things that I was willing to do, things I wasn't. And it's, I think hopefully all of us get to have some of those moments in business where you just look back and you're like, man, that was just one of those springboards to something so much better.
Yep.
And that was it for me. I mean, I get to work with people I really enjoy. I think I get to do really meaningful work. I get to help people build businesses they love to own, where they get to have an impact, where they get to create a meaningful amount of income or build wealth over time. But it still leaves me plenty of flexibility and autonomy to, travel, to be very present in my family's lives, and and coach my kids as one's grown up and fast approaching a senior, being a senior in college, and the other one's
Wow.
12. Man, that 12 turns into 21 in the blink of an eye, and it's fun to be able to be totally available for whatever experiences that can present. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of it.
I love it. I love it. And like as an extenuation or an extension of that, talk to me about how you help other people do this, right? Because I think this is really unique and unlike a lot of business coaches that I've interviewed or that I've interacted with over the past or in the past 15, 20 years, everybody's got their own approach, but talk to me about your approach. How do you get somebody started and help them start to create their own ideal business and they don't create this monster that then dictates their life?
So, I think the first thing that I always kind of start with in our industry is most of us that got into this got into it because we were passionate about or excited about the training side of things or the service or helping people, not necessarily the business side. So, I think it's really important to meet people where they are, right? And understand who they are, but then also where they want to go. I see this the same way, or at least, I probably shouldn't be too presumptive here. Like, I see this the way that I think you would see designing a program for somebody.
Yep.
Assess where somebody is, identify what their goals are, where they want to go, and then we build a plan to get there, and then we execute the plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there are plenty of people in the industry that are happy to just say, do what I've done. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, I mentioned I've founded 2 franchises, and that's essentially what a franchise is.
Right.
But I also think that there are some potential pitfalls with trying to adopt somebody else's thing and saying, this is a great fit for me. And, I like the idea of saying, hey, Mike, construct the thing that makes sense for your family, for your kids, for your goals, the clients you want to work with. And for me, that's the problem I want to solve. Not everybody wants to solve that problem.
Yep.
But that's the thing that I think gets me really excited to do what I do. And coming from a background of coaching athletes, every athlete was different, right? Everyone, they brought their own strengths, talents, limitations to the table. And it's like, how do we make the most of what this person has to offer, right?
Yeah.
So that's just the mentality I've always kind of had, I guess. And so when I work with somebody, that's the objective. It's not to make somebody a clone of Mike and iFast or a clone of Eric Cressy or a clone of Luca or whoever else. It's like, how do we help you build the thing that you want to build that can have the type of impact you want to have?
Right.
And it's sometimes it's a little bit of a puzzle, but I think that's part of what makes me always want to come back to coaching, right? And I mentioned when I had kind of drifted away from that role, it was very unfulfilling.
Yeah.
Obviously I know you and I know Bill really well and have for a long time. And I think that, you'd both probably be pretty bored if you were just out running a workout of the day, F45-esque type of thing that it's like one size fits all. And that's not what probably energizes you. And for me, it's essentially the same way when it comes to business.
Yeah. So I'm interested, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that because, like you said, you come into iFast, there's an assessment process, right? Or like a diagnostic process. And I'm sure you and I have done this probably numerous times over the years, either for RTS or iFast. But what does that look like for you now, right? So somebody new wants to get started. What does your assessment or your diagnosis process look like to help somebody get started?
There's like 2 sides to it, right? There's the, hey, you're going to give us a lot of the tangible data. I need to know what your business is, what your background is. Most of the people that I work with have a business. They're not aspiring to have a business.
Right.
So okay, where's your location? How much square footage do you have? Who do you train? What's your monthly revenue look like? And all the basic information. But then we get into some of that subjective stuff, and I just get to ask a bunch of questions and ask, stuff to determine what is it that you're excited about? What do you want to do? What would success be to you? What do you maybe want to avoid? Maybe, and it's definitely not a one size fits all kind of PAR-Q line of questioning, because every answer leads to a different potential question, right? So if you tell me that this is what you want to do, then I need to kind of unpack that and know why. And I got to know why you feel that's where you're going to try to go. I mean, if somebody tells me, well, I want 150 clients, then I want to know, well, what do you think 150 clients will actually mean to you? Is that going to be, are you assuming that will bring some quality of life with it, some amount of income with it? It'll provide less kind of volatility in your, monthly revenue, so sometimes it's understanding what they believe they want and why. Sometimes it's understanding where maybe their limitations or constraints are. A lot of times it's figuring out, hey, what are the things that you're really good at, and what are the things that maybe you need to eliminate, delegate, or just completely outsource. And so just a lot of discovery, and then customize a plan. And when I say customize a plan, it's probably very much like you would with a training client. I mean, there's still some fundamental principles that you adhere to, and there's probably a structure that you adhere to. I mean, you're not putting the warm up last.
Right.
So that's kind of the way that I view this is, okay, there are things that have to be in place. We have to be able to connect with new prospects. We have to be able to convert them into clients. We have to be able to coach them in a way that delivers the result they want through an experience they enjoy, that generates referrals, it retains people, it generates reviews. And so there's that kind of flywheel that's happening. But how we arrive at that, I think, can be adapted to each person and what they want out of being a business owner.
Love it. So here's a question that I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on. How many people, when you're going through this process, maybe they know like the KPIs, right? They know the numbers and the objective stuff. But when you start digging into the why do you want to do this, like some of the more, I don't want to say fluffy stuff, but like how many people just legitimately have either lost their way or have no clue what they're doing, or like what their end goals are with their business?
Like 80%?
Really? It's that big?
Yeah. I mean, because it's a hard job. Like being a small business owner is hard. Right. I just went back to my hometown yesterday to drop my mom off. And I looked around and I'd see this building. I'm like, man, there used to be, it's on a river, right? So there used to be a boat dealership there. And I remember when there was a restaurant here and all these businesses that didn't last. I mean, it's not easy. So, people get consumed by what they have to do today. And, they lose that vision. They lose what got them excited about this in the first place. And, I don't think it's, this terrible thing. It's just almost like allowing people to get back to what excited them about being a business owner in the first place, but with this new understanding of what actually owning business is like.
Right.
So, and that's the same process I went through. I mean, I had one company that was an Inc. 5000. I mean, we were like 583 in the Inc. 5000, had 2 franchises ranked in the Entrepreneur Franchise 500, had, a pretty big operation. And I went back and did the same thing and said, okay, knowing what I know now, what would I do if I started over?
Yeah. And you started over. You literally did it, right? Like that's what's so impressive to me is you had all of these clout-like moments, right? And you can list all those things and you're like, nope, this isn't working for me anymore. It's not working for, my family and my long-term vision for what I want to be. So like that's why one of the reasons I have so much respect for you is you could take all that and all those things and just say, okay, I'm not going in the direction that I want. How do I come back, find my North Star and go in that direction again?
And I think the hardest part of that I was really well prepared for, right? Like my first career, I really thought my identity was being a college baseball coach. I was wrapped
Right.
up like that was my identity.
Right.
And there are still people who view me in that lens many years later. I saw one of
Right.
my former players when I was at a baseball tournament the other day. He just popped over and it's like, coach.
That's cool.
And I mean, that's a wonderful kind of piece of my life, but it also prepared me for the fact that when I wanted to kind of do this, kind of blow it up and start over, it's like, man, who you help, the impact you have, whether it's on your family, the people that you serve, that's your identity, not the brand name on the front door, not the job title. And I had already gone through that experience once, so I was definitely a lot more comfortable with it the second time around.
Yeah, for sure. So something that you and I had mentioned prior to the show and something that you have said you've been really trying to infuse more in your own business is this idea of accountability and accountability coaching. So really a two-part question here. Number one, why? Like what made you start making this a bigger portion of what you do, and how are you going about doing it? Because you and I both know ideas are not the issue anymore, right? Ideas are not an issue, but holding somebody's feet to the fire, having accountability and getting stuff done, that's a whole nother story.
So and not to say that this is unique or whatever else, but I'm somebody who really kind of roots everything in reality, right? It's like I don't spend much time thinking about the way I wish things were.
Right.
It's like this is who people are. This is what they have going on. This is where the bottlenecks are. How do we make this better? And the thing that I really understood all along, but I don't know that I solved the problem maybe as well as I could have, was the fact that, man, it's not a lack of knowing what somebody could do. Now, we may need to narrow for people because they have so many options. It's like, how do we facilitate them doing the things they need to do? Because, again, I'm not one of those people, and you see a lot of this in the business coaching world, not necessarily specific to fitness, but they almost act as if their stuff exists in a vacuum, right? And we see this with trainers too. We see it with coaches, like, hey, this should be the top priority. Everything else falls off the plate. I'm like, well, if I have kids and I have clients that are already paying me and I have all these other responsibilities, I need to be able to commingle all these things and still make it work.
Yep.
And so, that was something that I was always curious about and trying to find a way to make it easier for people to execute the things I wanted them to execute.
Right.
At the same time, there was, I noticed this very prominent pattern. Like before the pandemic, we could find a direct correlation. The people who attended our live events, the people who engaged in that way, they always did better than the people who didn't as far as improving their performance.
Sure.
Well, during the pandemic, this correlation really kind of disappeared because people were coming to Zooms and doing things for different reasons, right? There was in some ways, it was probably, there was a mental health component. There was a social support. There was just, having some sense of connectedness, but it wasn't necessarily like, hey, I'm coming here for solutions that I'm going to go apply. And so I wanted to get back to that and say, okay, what can we put in place that we can link to, performance, something that we can say, there's this correlation because, we do probably 12 to 14 Zooms a week for clients, like group Zooms.
Right.
And it's fine. They can come for whatever reasons they need to come, because sometimes being a business owner can feel like you're out on an island or something, right? Like there's so many things that go into it, and we want to support them in any way we can. But we still have to make sure that we've got things in place that facilitate progress.
Yep.
So what we started to do was this thing that we call Win the Week. And every week, people are slotted into a group, right? They're in maybe a Monday to Monday group, a Tuesday to Tuesday. You get the picture, right? Like it's a weekly cycle. And we work with them to identify, hey, what are your 3 biggest action items that you need to accomplish to move forward? And, we give them some parameters, like, okay, they have to be things that you can actually do with the time you have available, with the resources, or the amount of money you have available. It's not just blank canvas here. Like you're already committed to these obligations on these days. You've already filled these containers of time. So with what we have, what can you get done? And so we work with them to identify those things and clarify them and make them tangible action items. And then for most of the core action items that happen in a business, we've got videos and checklists and scripts and templates and everything. So it's more or less like, okay, if you want to go deploy this thing, here's everything that you need to go deploy it. And then they know, okay, if they need help, go to this Zoom with this coach on this day, ask these questions, here's the stuff that you need. We check in with them during the course of the week. We text them and say, how are we doing? Do you need anything? And so we've kind of woven this in because it's so easy to get pulled in different directions as a business owner, right? Like always going to have people tugging at your time. They want you to spend time with them to do this or answer that or whatever else. And so we just have to make sure that we're helping people move forward while still maintaining the things that they're already committed to, while still fulfilling the obligations they've made, while still being able to be present in whatever their personal life entails. We can make this incremental progress. And if you're winning each week with those 3 action items over the course of the year, you knock out, 100, 150 things, big or small, that stuff compounds and you make a ton of headway. And so, in a period now where, man, we have a guy in a coaching group that literally watched YouTube videos to build his own house. You have access to all the information you need, but we've got to be able to vet what we're actually going to use and make some decisions. And then we actually have to be able to execute. And so we've really made this a core piece of what we do. And, it kind of gets back to, me comparing the ideal business stuff to you with a client. In some ways, it's kind of the same type thing. If you have a plan, then that client coming in to train with you, well, there's a plan of this is the stuff that we're going to do today to move forward. And we do have constraints. We're only going to be able to be together for this much time.
Right.
This many sessions during the course of a week. How do we make the most of that and still make sure you're on track to reach your goals? And so we do a lot of that. And I think it's one of the cooler things that we've done. And frankly, I would tell you that for an independent training business owner, stuff like that, some sort of accountability or progress facilitation for the 165 hours they're not under your supervision is going to be a big piece of what I think of as the future of our industry.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk more about that here in a few minutes because I want to discuss that. But, when it comes to this idea of accountability and like when people hear things like, oh, your big 3 for the week, I think it's so like natural for them. Like you're just naturally inclined to think, oh yeah, that's simple. Like I already knew that, right? But you and I both know it might be simple, but that doesn't mean executing on it is really easy. And I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up, right? And it feels like you found all these different ways, like you alluded to kind of bake accountability into the week, right? It's like, okay, you got your big three and you got your checklist and then you got your follow-up text and you've got your Zoom meeting. So it's like, regardless of where somebody gets stuck, right? There's some sort of outlet to help get them moving forward again, because you and I both know like momentum is a real thing. When momentum stops in your business, it's like pulling an anchor off the bottom of the ocean to get it going again. So I just love that you found all these different touch points to make sure people are keeping their momentum and moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot that I do that's super complicated, that is, rocket science or whatever else. And I think that's kind of the beauty of it, right? I think that, yeah, sure. People say, well, I get it, the big three thing. I'm like, okay, well, have you done it 50 weeks in the past year? Have you made sure that you've done the basic things that you need to do to make progress in a way that have compounded for you? And so you can look back and say, I'm really proud of the progress I made. Because if you haven't, you may know it, but you may not be doing it at the level that you want. And the people listening to this are coaches. Well, sometimes it helps to have a coach just to make sure that you do it, because I don't know that the idea of, hey, I know I need to have my 3 action items for the week or anything. None of that's new. I mean, I've been using a paper planner since 1994, doing that sort of thing.
Right.
And it's very much like me writing an email newsletter for 18 years without missing a day. I'm very much a creature of habit with that sort of stuff. And I also know that I'm kind of the outlier. It's very easy for somebody to say, well, hey, I know this, but I did it 15 weeks out of 50. Well, what if we get you to do it 50 weeks out of 50?
Yep.
I mean, how much more progress do we make? That consistency compounded is life-changing.
Yeah. It's the proverbial principle of the slight edge, right? Mm-hmm. I know you're a believer in that, as am I. Fantastic book if you haven't read it. Okay, so I want to change topics a little bit, because we've talked a lot about your process, but this is something that even when we're hanging out, I love to ask you this question. And so I'm sure the listeners want to know this as well. As a business guy, what is working in our space today? Whether it's marketing, selling, what kind of trends are you seeing that maybe somebody that's listening in could deploy in fairly short order and see some progress in their business?
So the first thing that comes to mind is the ability to go back offline a little bit and be willing to do some of the things that might have worked when I got into business or when you got into business. And some of the neighborhood marketing, the networking, the strategic alliances, even direct mail campaigns, some of that. And, that may seem very antiquated to some people, but as with many things, like the pendulum swings really far one way and then it kind of settles back in. Well, we've got so many people that are very online focused. And then we've got this explosion of franchise-based training solutions. I mean, so many group training businesses, whether it's a boot camp-ish type of business or the specialty things like the Pilates or Cycle Bar or whatever, franchises, and I understand this market pretty well since I was in, you're looking for things that are very scalable, things that don't take maybe the highest skill labor. And so you try to make it as systematic as possible. And it's way easier to systemize, hey, let's go all run the same Facebook ad. Right. Let's all go run the same organic campaign online. Let's all do the same stuff. And it's much harder to systemize, hey, go be effective as a networker, or go build strategic alliances with businesses in your community or whatever else. And so it's left this gap where that side of the industry, when I would have been owning two businesses at a time, was way more competitive in neighborhood marketing and direct mail and that sort of stuff than it is now.
Yeah.
And it's a faster cycle too, because as somebody who has built a business using email a lot, the cycle of building a relationship, that buying cycle, is much longer than if I meet you. I mean, I can expedite the building of this relationship and the building of perceived value and demonstration of ability. I can get more done in 20 minutes than I might be able to get done in 20 weeks just doing it online. So, I think that's a huge opportunity. And for the people who may be a little bit more introverted or whatever else, start from the inside out. Like, you can do this with the relationships you have, the people inside your facility. I mean, get them to introduce you to new people. Do more things where you allow them to introduce you to guests. They bring them in, or they introduce you to other people in their lives, or they open doors for the businesses that they're a part of, or the organizations that they're affiliated with. And, I think that's a big piece of the puzzle here. Another thing that I think, and this ties right back into what I was talking about before, is meeting clients where they are. I hear a lot of people during the summer, especially since we're recording this, when kids are out of school and that sort of thing, they're like, well, hey, things are slow. People want to pause. People want to cancel. And I'm like, well, that's because we condition them to think that if they're not here 3 times a week, they're not deriving the value needed to pay the fee they pay.
Yeah.
And if we take on the responsibility of being their coach, we should be able to get ahead of that. We should be able to say, hey, I know you guys are going to be going on vacation, or you're going to have, these things come up or whatever else. Let's talk about the plan to make sure that you're making the most of all these experiences. You feel the way you want to feel. You look the way you want to look. And you design plans around that and make this more about the client and less about attendance to a workout. And
I like that a lot.
I think that, again, if you look at the way that businesses outside of fitness have evolved, right? The way that fast food went to fast casual, went to DoorDash and everything else. And so everything's very convenient. Everything's built around the preferences of the consumer. It's only common sense to think that our industry will evolve that way too.
Yeah.
So if we say, okay, we're going to meet these people where they are, and we're going to illustrate that we are the best solution for them, not that they need to drop everything and conform to us, we're probably going to stand out, because franchises aren't equipped for that, right? It goes against that model. And if that's a big piece of our competition, that leaves a pretty big gap for us to tap into. So sure. Local marketing, franchise, kind of the franchise alternative, meeting people where they are. The other thing that I would tell you is follow up is king. People all understand this idea of, hey, I'm going to get a lead. I need to go. I mean, it's kind of refreshing as a guy who's been around the business side of stuff for a long time, that people actually are willing to invest time and money in marketing now, because that was not always the case. But, if you get a lead, that person, I see this as a pipeline, right? Like once they're in the pipeline, we're going to follow up with that person and nurture that relationship until the point that they either say, look, you're not for me, or until they become a client.
Right.
And, I think of this as, like, in other industries, they have account managers, right? And this is kind of being an account manager. It's like, okay, I've got these leads that are in my market, in my territory or whatever else, and I'm just going to keep nurturing them until I win their business.
Yeah.
We need more of that because if you spent money or time to get that lead, it's valuable. I consider it like I've always called it an asset. Now, an accountant is not going to call this an asset. It's not something that goes on the balance sheet, but every person that's raised their hand and said, "Hey, I'm potentially interested in what you have to do," that's an asset. I'm going to keep following up with them, even if they choose somebody else.
Yeah.
That's fine because even dating back to my time as a baseball coach in college, like there are plenty of people who chose a bigger school and then decided it wasn't for them, and I got them in
Right.
year two, right?
Yeah.
And same thing here. I don't really care about being somebody's first business coach. I kind of would prefer to be their last business coach.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so well said. And like I was just talking about this with my current intern Sandy. She's working on creating some kids programs. And, any new program you start takes time to build, right? And you have to build and cultivate the trust and the understanding of what you're doing. And one thing I tried to impress upon her is something that I stole from you. So I'll give you the credit here, but one thing you always said was it's like just keep showing up because never know when the time is going to be right for somebody else, right? Like we don't get to dictate, "Oh, I'm running a sale. I want you to start coaching with me now." Like no, it doesn't work like that. They figure out when they're ready and when they've gotten fed up or they're not having success or their back's up against the wall, maybe that's when they reach out to you, but we don't get to dictate when somebody starts working with us. That's their decision. And until then, we just have to keep showing up and give them value and show them what we could hopefully do for them if we would work together.
Yeah, I think that we want people to be on our schedule, but that's not how we buy.
Yeah, right. Yes.
And I think about my schedule, and I'm not saying it's reflective of everybody's, but like like last week, I was in Maine to host a mastermind at Doug Sperling's facility. Week before that, I was in Florida. I spoke at a Perform Better event, took my family to Disney. This weekend, we're going to a baseball tournament in Northern Ohio and taking kids to like Cedar Point, an amusement park up there.
Yeah.
Then the next week, we've got people in town for a coaching group. And it just goes on and on all summer that way. So if somebody came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to join this program? It's this many days a week." And if I said no, they'd probably say, "Well, he's not serious. He's not committed. He's not, he's a tire kicker or whatever else." I'm like, "Man, have you looked at my calendar?"
Right.
And it's like, these are things that are important in my life. And I think we as humans understand that we have very full lives with a lot of things going on. As business owners, we almost want people to forget that and say, just prioritize the thing that I'm selling.
Yeah.
And
doesn't work like that.
The smart business owner is going to skate to where the puck is going here. And they're going to say, "You know what? I need to be a really valuable and kind of convenient part of this person's life, because if I am, I'm going to stick around."
Right.
Instead of saying, "I expect this person to arrange every facet of their life around me." At that point, you're a short timer.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball here. And I want to know, it's been a while, what, 4 years now? 4 years? I mean, think about where we were 2019, COVID, post-COVID, 2023. It's been a wild ride, right? To say the least. And I would love to just hear from you. Where do you see fitness businesses continuing to evolve in the next 3 to 5 years?
The franchise thing will continue to pick up steam because there's enough money behind it that it's just headed in that direction. I think that independent business owners will do better with well-rounded, kind of more holistic, and I don't mean that in kind of a, like I'm not thinking in some sort of yoga-esque type way when I say holistic. It's just like, man, you're going to have to check more boxes than just hosting workouts.
Okay.
You're going to have to be and again, this comes from a sport coaching background. If I'm somebody's coach, I'm their coach all the time, not just a practice. And taking the responsibility of being somebody's coach that helps them with their recovery, that helps them with their nutrition, that helps them with problem solving to navigate the various challenges thrown their way. Um, I think that that's a big piece of the future. Um, I, I think, and this may be scary to some people, but I see this as an opportunity. I think that at some point in the not so distant future, somebody's going to come along and due to group training, what Planet Fitness did to health clubs, and make it a $39, $49 a month group commodity as a franchise. And there are a few people in certain corners of the country that have done that, especially with like outdoor fitness because their overhead was low.
Sure.
But I mean, it's coming. There's no way it won't. The fact that it has taken this long is kind of astounding because when I was getting started with this, man, you go to a health club and somebody they'd have a schedule of 25 different group classes through the week, and they'd give you childcare and everything else, and it was part of your $49 a month membership
Yeah.
fee.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's coming. And for the people that are workout hosts, it's just the same thing's going to happen to them as happened to the people who essentially just rented people access to equipment. And yeah, it's going to disrupt that side of the market. I do not think for a minute that online training is going to squeeze out all the offline stuff. And I would have told you the same. I mean, this is not revisionist history. I would have told you the same thing in May or June of 2020. Like, people need community. They want to be out and they don't want to be holed up in their house all the time. So now I do think the online piece of it is forever baked into what we do moving forward. And it's not just, hey, I'm going to give you access to some travel workouts. It's, again, I'm going to be your coach. And if that's problem solving when you're on the road, then that's what we do. If that's, providing you a quick accountability text in the middle of the week to see how you're doing with the stuff I ask you to do outside of the gym, that's what we do. So I think that's going to continue to evolve. I think that the gaps with things like small group and semi-private, smart independent trainers will kind of settle there a little bit more than try to compete on volume, since that's where the franchises that are in Class A real estate and have investors behind them, so they're not hesitant to spend a lot of money on marketing, will kind of rest. So personal, more intimate, more customized, more specialized, that stuff, it's going to win the day because we see it everywhere else. We're only going to continue to see it in our industry. Sometimes we're kind of late to the party with that, but everywhere else, man, people want what they want, and they're not going to be apologetic about it. So we have to meet them where they are.
Right. I always think of it, not to be political, because I'm not going to make this a political show, but people always talk about the shrinking of the middle class, right? It's the same thing in our space. The middle ground people are going to get pushed out, and you're either going to be on this side where it's high volume, lots of people, not a lot of coaching, or you're going to have like these smaller niche boutique type spots where it's very intimate. There's accountability, high level coaching. Like, there's always going to be a demographic and a subset of the population that wants this. And so that's where I've always kind of trended. And another guy I know we followed over the years, Dan Kennedy, talks a lot about that, right? Like, hey, like this end of the spectrum is generally underserved. So if you can find a way to plug yourself in there, you're generally not going to have issues keeping your business fairly steady.
Yeah. And, don't mistake, like when I say accountability, some people want to like take that word and replace it with like babysitting.
Yeah,
Not
it's
the
not the
same,
same. No.
right? I mean, basically, it's like having a training partner.
Yep. Absolutely. I like
And if
that.
I have a training partner, I'm going to show up because I know somebody's paying attention, somebody's counting on me, and I think that we have that ability to play that role for people. And man, it's for me, it's fulfilling because it means more people are going to see results, which means that I'm having more of an impact, but I'm also benefiting from it too because better impact or bigger impact that I have or deeper impact that I have, the better, healthier my business is.
Yep. Okay, cool. Last but not least, I'm excited to talk about this one. Talk to me about the process.
So the process, man, that's a loaded question, right? So obviously, I'm not gonna pretend that this is like some mysterious thing that you don't know anything about. Um, so I came to you and said, "Hey, would you be interested in working together to create this platform where we share some of the best stuff that's going on in our industry?" I mean, I've seen this in other industries. To be frank, I don't really pay attention to what other business people do in our industry. The ones that I really respect and like for the most part were people who were clients of mine that have gone on and done great things.
Yep.
And I'll let them do their own thing. But I do study a lot of business stuff outside of fitness.
Yep.
And there were these newsletters that would come out and they would essentially kind of aggregate all the best stuff. Because again, we talked about this earlier, there's no shortage of ideas, there's no shortage of information. How do we filter?
Yeah.
And, so you and I talk about this idea like, okay, could we do something like that? And man, you took the ball and ran with it. And that's the beauty of this is somebody gets to use you as their expert kind of curator of this is the best stuff that I've seen recently in our industry that's going to help you move forward. So they don't have to spend all their already kind of spread thin time sifting through everything to find what's good. You've already curated the best stuff, the stuff that you go to and study.
Yeah.
And obviously with your impact and your your success and prominence in this industry, like you're pretty good at vetting the right stuff to make somebody a better coach.
Right.
So each week you kind of curate the greatest hits and share this sort of stuff. And I am so excited because I don't know your audience quite as well, like obviously as I would know mine.
Right.
But most of my people are independent, right? Like they are coaches, business owners who they're looking for an edge. They're looking for a competitive edge. And that's what I see this as is like, hey, you can go here and essentially gain an edge, stay ahead, stay on the cutting edge of what's happening in the industry, stay out in front of the competition. And, for the people that I encounter, and I'm certain if they're listening to this podcast, they fall in this category. It's like they're a student, they're a lifelong learner. And so this is going to fill their bucket pretty quickly. So pretty excited. Just kicked it off.
Yeah, well, I was pretty excited when you asked me to do it. It took me a little while to kind of wrap my head around exactly how it would look and feel. But I'll make sure I put a link to this in the show notes if you're interested in getting it. It's just like a once a week newsletter. But yeah, I'm excited because it forces me to go through and kind of, okay, I think I've got about 60 coaches right now whose like websites I kind of go through and see, okay, what they put out this week? What podcast were they on? What videos did they drop? And man, out of 60, I think I've made it my goal. The minimum would be 3, and I think the most I would put in any week is 10, unless there's just like somebody just decides all this great content is dropped in 1 week. But it's been really fun because one, it keeps me up to date on like what's new and what people are doing. It gets me out of my comfort zone because I think we all have this tendency to get into our own ecosystem. And I've never wanted myself or iFast to feel like an echo chamber where it's just the same people, same thoughts. So it's been a lot of fun. And man, I think the fun thing about it too is that I don't feel any need because you haven't put any constraints on me. And it's not like I feel like I have to promote anybody. Like there's some authors and some people on there in these first couple episodes that I'm sure most of you have not heard of. But man, they're really sharp people. They're doing really great work. So definitely, if you are interested in leveling up, make sure you check that out. I'll put the link in the show notes. But man, do you have time for a quick lightning round before I let you go?
Oh, sure.
Okay, it'll be fast. I promise. I promise. Okay, number one, how is baseball going this summer?
It's been fun. I've been able to do a lot of focus on long-term athlete development, and I'm coaching 12-year-olds, and I am 100% adamant about them being 12 and enjoying being 12.
I love that. I love that. Number two, how are our Reds doing this year? I'm bad. I've not followed the Reds at all this year.
Lots of fun things. You need to start following the Reds.
Yeah.
So they are a very young team, a very athletic team. They just brought up the number one ranked prospect, and he has shown out already. He's already recorded the fastest running time of any major leaguer. He's hit a 458-foot home run is his first home run. He is just explosive. So they're fun. There was actually an article on ESPN.com today saying that they are a must-watch team.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, it's funny because Cade's been on me about going to a game. So I'm going to have to make that happen here sooner than later. Number three, you mentioned Disney. How is Disney?
Disney's always good. And, me being the Disney aficionado and, our family going a lot, we have the luxury of never being rushed and feeling like, oh, we got to go squeeze it all in. But Disney if you are a student of business, Disney is a wonderful place to go because all the things that we talked about, like, hey, there are people there's always going to be a group that pay this fee and are willing to invest. And then, so you can learn so much from seeing upgrades and different things like that. And that's about 10 episodes by itself that I can pop in. And it was a great time. And, we do some cool stuff there that I get as much out of it business wise as I do recreation wise every time we go.
Yeah, love it. Okay, last but not least, what's next for Pat Rigsby, man? What are you working on? What are you excited about? Anything?
So, and this probably tells me that I'm in the right lane, right? I'm excited about everything that I'm doing now, and I'm excited to keep kind of turning the dials to do more of it. I mean, we've got a family trip to Hawaii this summer. We've got a couple more fun baseball kind of trips, which are we're going to like Charleston, South Carolina for something and some of that. And so there's that, the live meetings. I love the people that I work with. So when they come to the meeting, like, man, we'll have the dinner and social at my house, and I'll love every minute of spending time with those people. The things we're doing about business we talked about a lot earlier, I'm excited to keep tinkering with that. So I think it's a fun place to be, to not feel like what's next has to be dramatically different than what's present.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. All right, man. This has been amazing. Appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on. It's always great catching up. Where can my listeners find out more about you and all the great stuff you're doing?
I'm on social media stuff, right? Like, I don't probably do as much with Instagram or any of those things. I have stuff there.
Right.
Our buddy Paul's the one who kind of manages that.
Yes.
But patrigsby.com kind of links out to everything. And if somebody wants to just connect with me, if they want to, you know, talk through anything, see if I can be of help, pat@rigsby.com, just shoot me an email. Again, there's very much like a personal component to this, and I just love to connect with people and see if I can be of help.
I love it, man. Well, Pat, again, thank you so much for coming on. This was so much fun.
Well, my pleasure. Always good to spend time with you, and maybe we'll have to make a trip to Cincinnati and catch that Reds game before long.
I love it.